Get ready to rumble. Schilling Show Unleashed on the Seven Thunders Media Network. Former city councilor, husband, father, and community watchdog. Your host, Rob Schilling.
Welcome to the Schilling Show Unleashed Podcast. Remember, your direct support makes our show possible, and you can directly support this podcast by visiting shillingshow.com and then clicking on the Patreon banner at the top of the page to make a monthly contribution. We appreciate your support.
The Schilling Show Unleashed podcast welcomes Marc Beckman, the CEO of DMA United, an award-winning ad agency, and author of the new book, Some Future Day, How AI is Going to Change Everything. Marc Beckman, thanks for joining us on the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast.
Rob, it's truly a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I want to start out with a core understanding of AI. We've all heard the term, but what exactly is going on behind the scenes with AI?
It's a really good question, and what I'd like to do to keep things simple is to break it down into two sections, really for beginners to understand. The two most powerful parts of artificial intelligence from a technical perspective right now break down into one, data capture and data analytics, and two, the creation of content. Think in terms of images, script writing, songs, and beyond. And those are the two areas where you'll see fundamental growth. And most of the stories coming through the news, this is an area where these two areas are where most of my clients, advertising space, are currently using the technology to improve their areas of business. Data capture, data analytics, and generative AI, the creation of original content.
What has me kind of confused about all of this is that it appears to be taking information that's already been created by humans and then kind of regurgitating it. But what happens when humans stop creating? Are we at the end of the road?
So that's a good question. You're correct. The large language models, companies like OpenAI, and I'm sure you heard of the Chinese platform DeepSeek.
Yes.
What they've done is they've accumulated a corpus of information that humans have created. And this could be everything from books and newspaper articles to magazines and video content. And what they've done is effectively train these LLMs on this corpus of data. And this is how the LLMs are knowledgeable. But what's happening now, which is really interesting, Rob, is that the LLMs we're finding are actually learning and having reasoning on their own. So this is what people fear. You raised a big topic, which is what I call we live in the age of dumb, where people might not utilize all of this information for the best purposes. They might become lazy and not use it for educational purposes and beyond. But the other piece that's really compelling right now is that the artificial intelligence is becoming so smart, it's finding areas, learning things that humans might not see. So there's some things that people are fearful of it in sometimes, but in other ways, people are excited about it. So think in terms of one area is medicine, where artificial intelligence can be used to locate biomarkers, gene markers and biomarkers that the human eye might not be able to capture right away, or would take a tremendous amount of time. So we're seeing great advancements because of artificial intelligence in the medical space and in science. So it could be fearful, right? People are afraid that this is going to become, a world where robots take over. I don't think that, but some really great developments are happening to make the world a better place too.
I want to get into the race that we have and the competitive nature of our relationship with China and AI. And I've heard this is make or break for the United States, that we have to maintain our edge. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. I've been saying this for years now. We are in an AI war with China. It impacts our, American nation in several ways. The first area is with regards to education, how history is told. So I mentioned earlier in our conversation, DeepSeek, which is an LLM that apparently has been distilled and trained off of OpenAI's data. So the Chinese entity was allegedly able to build this for a few $1 million. However, they've changed history a little bit. So if you ask about some, tarnishes in Chinese history, like the Uyghur slaves or Tiananmen Square, or even, Xi Jinping, their version of the events in history is kind of cleaned up and said in a way that really helps China's perception. And what happens if Americans' next generation are educated on a platform like that? It's not so great for us. The second area, which is interesting with regards to the AI war, is with regards to military development. For example, with the advent, I talk about this a lot in my book, my new book, Some Future Day, How AI is Going to Change Everything. It's actually my favorite chapter in the book, where I talk about this post-nuclear time period that we're entering, where artificial intelligence is going to radically transform the way wars are fought. And one area is through the efficiencies that artificial intelligence bring in both cost as well as in development. So drones, for example, today can be used to attack nations on different continents. There's a company in Israel that is already doing business with the United States Department of Defense, where by their drone technology can be utilized by anybody without a military background and from a far distance. So let's say we wanted to attack a entity in the Middle East, in Asia, in Europe, or beyond from the United States. We could do so. It's almost like a video game with swarms of drones. But what happens if that technology gets into the hands of a bad actor, let's say a state like Yemen? All of a sudden, they don't need to stand up a military arsenal as expensive and as strong as what the United States has built up. They could become a formidable force if they're flying these killing machines, these swarms of drones overseas directly into our major cities, into New York, LA, Miami, and beyond. And they're capable of doing that right now, right in your backyard, right outside of Washington, D.C. They could do that from Yemen. The technology is there. So it's this AI war with China is very serious, and it's something that we really need to build up. There are three parts to the AI ecosystem. I think in terms of algorithms, right, the software. I think in terms of power, we need a lot of energy because we require a ton of compute to run AI here in the States. And then finally, hardware. We're building infrastructure, these hyperscale data centers. So this is what, like, for example, President Trump, the day after the inauguration, he stood, at the White House and announced the Stargate project with SoftBank CEO, Oracle CEO, and OpenAI CEO. These infrastructural builds require a ton of hardware, many of which comes from the Chinese manufacturing. So that's a concern too, especially with regards to tariffs. We need that hardware to build these hyperscale data centers to run AI. So there are a lot of concerns as it relates to the American and Chinese AI war that we are in right now.
We should talk more about the hardware and the reliance on China. If this is national security related, and pretty much all of it would be, are we even safe sourcing hardware from China, or do we need to develop domestic with complete control over our supply?
This is definitely one of the points that we're focused in on right now, Rob. I think what we'll see is a lot of this hardware that we require to manage and run AI for these hyperscale data centers move into areas in Asia too, by the way, in places like Vietnam, South Korea. We'll probably see Japan step up, and then hopefully in the United States too. It's going to take a minute, I think, for the tariffs to really be realized as far as like onshoring jobs and re-energizing American factories. It's going to take a little bit of time until that's feasible, until that really comes to life. So until that comes to life, we're going to still rely on, our allies in Asia. Some of them might not be totally aligned with our government, like our form of democracy, places like Vietnam. But I think that we probably would do better off playing with friendly governments versus the Chinese government.
It seems regarding energy, Mark, that we have a problem with getting ahead of ourselves in this country. And I note that there have been, I think it was 3 Mile Island that was reconstituted, and there's going to be a push for other sources, including more nuclear being built. How's that going to play politically?
Well, I think it's great. A lot of people don't talk to me about the power piece of it, and I think it's really fascinating, Rob. Keep in mind, President Trump is planning to. He's already announced this with a recent executive order, I think about a week or two ago, where he announced that he's also going to unlock coal mining again. Yes. American coals are, an incredible resource, and I believe that these hyperscale data centers can be built near a lot of these coal mines and provide a tremendous source of sustainable energy. I think it could be really good. And the other thing that we could do is, if there's a move to continue to grow renewables, these hyperscale data centers could be blended where we're leveraging the coal short term for sustainable power while we're building out a renewable component to it, so that ultimately if the technology becomes strong enough, renewable could take over, right? Everybody's for it as long as it's feasible, as long as it makes sense. Right now, it doesn't make total sense. So I think we'll see the coal mines utilized as it relates to building these hyperscale data centers in regions across, think in terms of Pennsylvania, Ohio, running down through the Bible Belt, these areas. I think it will be really strong, actually, for the country.
So what about the labor necessary? We seem to have labor shortages across the country. Maybe people just got used to doing nothing during the pandemic shutdowns. Where are we going to find people to do all of this work? And do we have qualified and trained individuals?
Well, look, the truth of the matter is that artificial intelligence is going to impact job growth. And in some areas, it's not going to be so great. So to answer your question directly as it relates to people required to run and operate these hyperscale data centers, unfortunately, I have to tell you, I think a lot of that is going to be automated and used with machine learning and artificial intelligence. To take that concept a little further, I think we'll see a dissipating of certain white-collar jobs in the nation. Think in terms of lawyers, accountants, these types of individuals who are paid a lot of money, and now with artificial intelligence, resources will become a little bit distinguished because of AI's capabilities. That being said, I do think because of artificial intelligence, generally speaking, new jobs will come to life. So when I talked earlier about the automation of hyperscale data centers, somebody's going to have to treat those robots when they break down. Somebody's going to have to make sure that they're still working well. They're going to be specialists surrounding the AI ecosystem. Think in terms of creators, lawyers that now specialize in AI-related issues. There are a lot of ethical concerns that are going to come into play and run through different court systems. So I think similar to when cars came and replaced horses, people were afraid of even automotive, but ultimately it was the way to go, and new jobs were created and society flourished. And I think that's what we're going to see here. New jobs will come to life and will be in a different type of position pretty fast, Rob, actually. I don't think it's going to be in the long term. I write in my book, like I mentioned earlier, the new book, Some Future Day, How AI is going to Change Everything. I write about the fact that AI will radically change society in 3 to 5 years. And I think that what we're talking about right now as it relates to careers, that's real. That's a real issue.
You mentioned lawyers in particular. It's just fascinating to me because that has been a very specialized area that requires a lot of training. As you mentioned also, Mark, they get paid a lot of money per hour, and there are these huge law firms. What's going to happen to that industry, if you will, when AI takes over? What are all these people going to do?
Yeah, well, one thing that I think is really interesting is the sole practitioner who can't compete with these massive law firms, but is very capable. Well, that person now is going to have AI tools. There have been a few that have been developed that are just absolutely stellar already. And these AI tools will in real time help draft memorandums of law, fill out painstaking paperwork. So I think it's going to eliminate a whole sliver of lawyers and law firms at the big firms, but it will allow for individual sole practitioners to become a little bit more competitive. The other thing that we're going to see in the legal ecosystem, Rob, is a fundamental change with regards to access to legal resources. A lot of people that can't afford lawyers because lawyers are expensive and also won't handle a lot of the legal matters on their own because the paperwork might be confusing or too difficult to kind of get through. They'll be able to use artificial intelligence now on their own. Imagine like how many potential lawsuits there are against hospitals that go without being addressed because those individuals in the lower socioeconomic strata don't have enough money or resources to hire law firms. Well, now AI is going to solve that for these people in particular. So I think we're going to see a certain type of leveling with regards to access to legal resources, notwithstanding the fact that the fundamental structure of a law firm will change because of artificial intelligence.
I'm also thinking of the impact on the courts, which are one of the most stodgy institutions, as I see it, in the United States. Everything's done the old way. How are the courts and judges in their courtrooms going to deal with this change?
Well, look, the reality is that artificial intelligence is going to provide judges as well as lawyers with access to information quicker and in a more efficient way. So let me give you an analogy in the medical field right now. Google has stood up a tool, an AI tool called Amy, which allows for doctors to diagnose diseases, rare, underserved diseases, diseases that left our society even more than 100 years ago, in real time with almost 100% accuracy. So now, can you imagine if we apply that type of technology into the legal field, which I'm sure they're doing already, where now we could draw conclusions and connections between case laws and statutory law that will allow for, let's say, more justice to be realized. And I believe that's going to happen in real time too.
The Schilling Show Unleashed podcast continues in a moment. Our guest is Marc Beckman.
Join the revolution. Online at schillingshow.com.
ShillingShowMedia.com is your one-stop shop for websites, audio and video production, and photography.
ShillingShowMedia.com will take your project from conception to completion.
ShillingShowMedia.com is reasonably priced and highly professional.
Need a website for your business? Visit ShillingShowMedia.com.
Need a video created or edited? Visit ShillingShowMedia.com.
Have a photography or graphic design project? Visit ShillingShowMedia.com.
ShillingShowMedia.com is your one-stop shop for websites, audio and video production, and photography.
Visit ShillingShowMedia.com. That's ShillingShowMedia.com.
Looking out for us. Rob Schilling.
The Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Marc Beckman joins us here on his book, Some Future Day, How AI is Going to Change Everything. I want to go to the issue of labor and replacing humans in places where we're used to seeing humans, like stores, and it goes beyond that. How are we going to react as a society to interacting with machines?
Look, I hate to say this, but there are two types of tribes right now that are in society. There are tribes that like entertainment shopping. They'll go into a store. They like the music. They enjoy trying on, let's say it's a clothing store. They enjoy trying on the apparel and the accessories. They like interacting with the salespeople. To them, it's like a social activity. It's entertainment. Those people will continue to seek out and access those types of experiences. And then there's me. Mm-hmm. I don't want to try anything on. I don't want to speak to anybody. All I want to do is have the item that I'm looking for in my hand, fitting perfectly, and I move on. Artificial intelligence is fundamentally changing the retail experience. We're going to see verticals come to life where, consumer customization will allow for the shopper to access and see exactly what he's looking for, and then perfect sizing and then communications that are limited to that of what he or she wants to listen to. So I think these two tribes are going to, be in for a big experience that's very different. On the retail side, in particular, the consumer customization is going to come first, and that idea will transcend every industry, from fashion to art to music, sports, everything. You'll see more streamlined and better experience because of artificial intelligence between brands and individuals. It's interesting in my book, In Some Future Day, how AI is going to change everything. The first chapter, I break this concept down. It's called The Age of Imagination. And I go through in detail how this is going to, how the world, how like the shopping experience and consumers' interaction with brands is going to change. And I break it down in details. By the way, Rob, like each chapter, your audience should know, if they get the book, if they're curious and they're a beginner in AI, I wrote this book for beginners, people who are curious, but maybe a little intimidated to figure out how to get into AI. So what I do is, if you're interested in learning how to improve your career, your family, or your community, I provide after each chapter tools that they could access today, right? AI tools that are available now to make their lives better and easier and more efficient. And a lot of what I'm talking about right now with you as it relates to the retail experience is broken down in that first chapter, The Age of Imagination.
Well, this brings up a very important question. Sometimes when you're shopping, if you're looking for something, you see something you never would have considered and you like it, and then you get that and you kind of open up your world, and that would be true for music. If you're listening to something, oh, I never thought about listening to this type of music. If you're getting fed something that they think you'll like exactly, you may never be exposed to that new type of music, some different type of art, or some different type of clothing. So are we just going to become more insular in our choices and seeing less and less that doesn't appeal to us?
Rob, that's such a great idea that you just raised, or a great point that you just raised. And honestly, it's a concern of mine as well. There with some types of social media, unfortunately, and as well as like legacy media. Mm-hmm. We're in a moment in time now where we are seeing content pushed at us through machine learning. It is AI. But the algorithms are figuring out what it is that you might want. Think, for example, if you go onto Amazon, Amazon might tell you, hey, Rob, I see that you like this black T-shirt. You might also want this black sweater, or this black button-down shirt, or these black pants. And in fact, you're not there for any of that. You're going online to figure out what you want to buy as a gift for one of your parents. It has nothing to do with that. So, yeah, I do think that we're going to unfortunately experience this idea of narrowly being focused towards areas that the AI believes it's what you want to see or hear. But you'll be able to toggle those controls and turn them on and off as needed. So people need to pay attention. I talk about this often in the book. We're living in an age now where it's don't believe everything you see. You need to, verify everything that you see now. And that applies as it relates to shopping too. If it's just telling you to look for that black shirt and you're curious to see what else is out there, take a minute and do the research. Don't rely exclusively on, effectively, algebra.
I want to talk about the impacts on creatives, Mark, and as a creative person myself is certainly interested in this. So as an example, I have a friend on Facebook, used to be a neighbor, moved across the country, and he's a graphic artist. And for years, he was creating things in Adobe Illustrator, putting them online and getting comments. They were posters and things like that. Now he's just going to AI and creating what I would call more stunning pieces than he ever created before on his own, and yet no one is responding. He's not getting any likes or any comments on his work. So what happens to people like that?
Well, it's an interesting point. I think what we're going to see with regards to artificial intelligence, and I talk about this again in the book, I hate to keep saying that, but I think what we're going to see is a moment in time where the reality that humans outpace and beat machines over and over again comes to life. So in the book, I talk about the fact that, like, let's say you use artificial intelligence to create a song, right? The song could be beautiful. Let's say it's a song of revolution. The lyrics are gorgeous and they're spit out of ChatGPT in a matter of seconds. And the music accompanying the lyrics and the voice is controlled by AI. This is all, you could do this all today. And by the way, again, I mentioned this, like all the tools are listed in my book. If you want to create your own music, it's all in the book. But the problem is that AI, that algebra, doesn't understand what humans are really looking for, can't relate emotionally to what humans are doing. Never have the ability to beat Bob Dylan in a song of revolution, ever. So I think what's going to happen is the real creators, the true creators, people that are leading the visions of fashion houses, true fine artists, real visionary architects, at the end of the day, they'll win over and over and over again because they understand what it is that humans thrive for, what they want, what they're seeking from an emotional level. So for somebody like you that's creative, as long as you stay focused on creating, you'll have an edge over those people who are a little bit lazier and just relying on the machine to do the creativity.
Mark, you mentioned earlier the horse and buggy, which is a great example. What are some of the things that will cease to be over the next 5 to 10 years that we use daily now?
I'll tell you something that's not going to be a very popular answer from your audience, but I really believe it. I think our phones are going to go away. And what's going to happen, sadly, in due time, is that we're going to have chips embedded into our brain that are going to provide access to information in real time. And that information is going to provide the holder of those chips with an advantage in society. So imagine you're the chief executive officer of a corporation, and in real time, you need answers in the boardroom. The AI is going to activate. Now, here's why I think this is going to happen. First of all, as you know, Elon Musk is already building a company called Neuralink. But right here in New York City, there's a hospital that's been embedding chips into the brain of paralyzed patients, 3 patients specifically. And they're using the chips coupled with artificial intelligence to bypass neurons that are no longer firing in the paralyzed patient's brains. And what they've done is they've already succeeded in having the paralyzed patients move and feel again. People say, oh my God, I would never want a device in my body. I would never want a chip in my body. But imagine the power that will give certain individuals, coupled with the capitalistic type of society we live in. And then lastly, although it sounds so like sci-fi and far-fetched, I'm sure a lot of members of your audience have friends and family who are already living with devices embedded in their body. Think in terms of people who have heart ailments and beyond. So my prediction, and I really do believe this, is that no longer will we have phones. I think we're going to move away into a world where there's going to be this blending of chip implants that will be, fairly non-invasive at the right time. And those chips will allow for us to access data, to make phone calls, to help us with regards to GPS and destination mapping and beyond.
It's a fascinating future ahead. If people would like to get a copy of your book, Marc Beckman, Some Future Day, How AI is Going to Change Everything, tell us the best way and also to be in touch with you.
Rob, right now is a great time to get the book. When I launched the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, it sold out of both. So it went to number 1 and sold out, number 1 in AI and sold out completely. So Some Future Day, How AI is Going to Change Everything is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, major booksellers, and people can follow me at Marc Beckman, MarcBeckman. I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn, and beyond.
Mark, you've done a wonderful job in the book Some Future Day. Thanks for joining us today on the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast.
All right, Rob. Have a great day.
That concludes another edition of the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Visit us online at schillingshow.com, where you can directly support this podcast by clicking on the Patreon banner at the top of the page and making a monthly donation. Your support is essential for the continuation of the Schilling Show Unleashed podcast. Until next time,